Good morning. My name is Mitchell Remmert. I serve as the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Illinois Municipal League. I'm here today to speak with you about our legislative activities and to provide an update on issues that IML is actively involved in at the General Assembly this year. Our legislative department facilitates the advocate portion of IML's mission. At the most basic level, we do this by interacting with legislators, crafting and supporting legislation and policies that are beneficial to municipal governments, and opposing legislation and policies that are harmful. We're missing some slides. Our advocacy is guided by our board-adopted legislative principles and policies, as well as our core values, which are to promote local decision-making, preserve home rule powers, oppose unfunded mandates, preserve the rights of municipalities to decide employee wages and benefits, and protect state shared revenues. These core values are reflected in our state legislative agenda as well as our federal legislative agenda, which we develop in consultation with our policy committees, Legislative Committee, Executive Committee, and our Board of Directors each year. A copy of each agenda is provided in your packet today. I'd like to start with the state legislative agenda, which consists of 12 items whose subject areas range from utilities and meetings to pensions and environment. Each of these items is filed in at least one chamber of the General Assembly, and the agenda includes proposals that would do the following: allow non-home rule communities to impose stormwater utility fees, eliminate or reduce the state sales tax administrative fee, exempt local pass-through revenues from provisions of the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, also known as GATA, permit local authority to conduct remote meetings under the Open Meeting Act without a governor-declared disaster declaration, allow non-home rule communities to implement a sales tax by ordinance or resolution, remove municipal liability in the event of a cyber attack, re-amortize downstate public safety pension funds to 2050, and allow non-home rule municipalities outside of Cook County to implement a motor fuel tax. In addition to our state advocacy, we also directly engage with members of Congress on federal issues that impact our members, and we partner with the National League of Cities, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the Illinois Congressional Delegation to advance the interests of municipalities and shape federal policy. Our goals in this regard are reflected in our 2021 federal legislative agenda, which includes the following items: preserving qualified immunity at the federal level, supporting direct, unrestricted federal aid to communities regardless of size to allow them to respond to and recover from the COVID-19 public health crisis, supporting efforts to craft a fiscally responsible federal transportation and infrastructure funding plan, supporting legislation that would preserve the regulatory rights of states and municipalities with regard to the deployment of small wireless facilities. Now, the development of these agendas begin with our policy committees. We have 6 such committees comprised of municipal officials from across the state and covering different subject areas. These include general governance, land use, public health and safety, personnel and pensions, public work and transportation, and revenue and taxation. Our policy committees include mayors, municipal attorneys, aldermen, trustees, clerks, public works directors, and others. And during the spring legislative session, which runs from January to May, these committees serve as a resource to IML, offering input on various legislative proposals before the General Assembly. Over the summer and fall, these committees help IML staff research and vet ideas from municipal officials that may become part of our next state legislative agenda. Our legislative staff compiles these proposals, which are then further reviewed by our legislative committee and executive committee before being recommended to our board of directors for final approval. Once approved, we have these proposals drafted as legislation. Then we engage with senators and representatives to have them introduced in the Illinois House and Senate. If this is something you think you may be interested in the future, we regularly provide a form each summer and fall to all municipal officials to complete if they so choose. Just let me know if this is something you may be interested in, or keep an eye out for our solicitation, which we provide typically through our e-newsletters. In addition to our legislative agenda, we regularly review every legislative proposal that's filed in the General Assembly to determine whether or not it may be of interest to municipal governments. So far this session, legislators have filed over 7,500 bills, resolutions, and proposed constitutional amendments. And of these, we have taken a position on more than 1,600 items. As you know or will soon become aware, municipal government is affected by a broad category of issues. We've developed a general list of categories that we use to label legislation that's before the General Assembly. The list on this slide is not an exhaustive list, but it does demonstrate some of the categories that we use. So whether it's zoning, utilities, environment, gaming, pensions, or cannabis, we will take a position on a legislative proposal if it impacts municipal officials or municipal operations. Then on the topic of positions, we utilize 6 different bill positions depending on the nature of the legislation at hand. They're support, oppose, no position, neutral, under review, and bill of interest. I'd like to go through each of these and explain what they mean if you see them on one of our bill review reports. Supporting a bill and opposing a bill is pretty straightforward. We'll support an item if we believe it'll benefit municipal governments. We'll oppose an item if we believe it'll harm municipal governments. We may offer no position on a bill if we believe that it may be of interest to municipal governments, but this may indicate a belief by us that it is unlikely to garner sufficient support for passage, doesn't impose a harm or benefit, or there's no need to take a position at this time. We'll go neutral on legislation if it may have an impact on municipalities, but affects municipalities different based on demographics, geographic location, or other differential issues. In these cases, municipalities may want to elect to convey their individual positions to legislators. We might also take a neutral position if the final bill is the result of negotiations involving IML or other organizations which resulted in objections being resolved towards municipal interests, so neither a support nor opposed position is necessary. Sometimes we'll label a bill as being under review. Specifically, these are items that we are seeking additional information before developing a formal position. We regularly provide updates when we take a formal position on bills or amendments that were previously designated as being under review. And then finally, we might label some items as being a bill of interest. These are bills that we may take a position on at a later point during the legislative session, but have not yet been thoroughly reviewed or reached a designated position. I'd like to pause here. You might be wondering how we take a bill position. As I mentioned, we have our board adopted principles and policies. We can most often determine our position based on that. We regularly gather a small group of IML staff to review all legislation filed in a given day, and we propose preliminary positions. They're then further vetted by IML Executive Director Brad Cole. In some instances, Brad may consult with the IML board president to get additional input before we take a formal position as an organization. And in some extreme cases, we may solicit the input of our entire board of directors. So each item that's filed in the General Assembly can be searched on our website. That's iml.org/bill tracking. This includes bills that we may not have taken a position on. You can search for legislation by topic, by bill number, or the effect it may have, such as if it imposes a mandate, a revenue reduction, or a preemption of municipal authority. Our website also hosts a bill page for each individual bill. For example, the slide before you shows our bill page for our proposal that would exempt municipal pass-through revenues from provisions of GATA. After taking a position on a bill, we will engage directly with legislators and legislative staff to communicate our position. In many cases, we'll offer spoken or written testimony before legislative hearings. We'll also meet with stakeholders who support or oppose issues of concern and draft proposed amendments to the bills in order to remedy any concerns we may have. I would like to note that we have a great working relationship with the City of Urbana state legislators. This includes Representatives Carol Amons and Brad Halbrook, and State Senators Chapin Rose and Scott Bennett. Our advocacy efforts are often supplemented by additional resources, including position papers and fact sheets that we develop on a variety of legislative issues. Your packets today include examples of fact sheets that we've provided as a resource for you. And I'd now like to provide a little information on how you can register your position on a particular bill. When a bill goes before a legislative committee that impacts your community, you can register your support or opposition as an individual or a member of the City Council on the item at the General Assembly's website. That's ilga.gov. So the slide before you, the left image will show you the landing page for the General Assembly website, and this is going to contain a lot of resources about state statutes, special reports, daily schedules, audio and video links, and information on bills. And from this website, you can go to the General Assembly's dashboard. That's the screen on the right. The dashboard will allow you to see committees scheduled for a particular day, week, or month, and the bills that are assigned to that committee. And from there, you can file your position on a particular legislative item. In my experience, state legislators are very responsive to their local communities. Emails and witness slips on legislation are good, but I've found that a call from a local official to a state legislator can make the difference between them supporting and opposing a bill. So you wield a lot of authority in your position, and it can really help our efforts and your efforts before the General Assembly. So now that I've generally explained what we do and how we do it, I'd like to include some subjects that have surfaced at the General Assembly this year. As I previously mentioned, there have been more than 7,500 items introduced, and we're currently tracking more than 1,600. I just want to highlight some of the big issues. Some of the items that are tracked include 304 bills that would impose new mandates on local governments and 118 proposals that would preempt municipal authority. We've included those proposals in two reports that we regularly publish, our proposed state mandates report and our proposed legislation imposing local preemption report. Both of those reports are available on our website. Our general website's iml.org. We also have a legislative page that's iml.org/legislative. You can find both of those reports on there. Since January, both chambers of the General Assembly voted on changes to the procedural rules that allow them to conduct committee hearings virtually. We've participated in many of these committees, offering testimony on several legislative proposals. And one ongoing topic for consideration is the issue of criminal justice reforms. So as many of you are probably aware, in January, the General Assembly met for a final 6-day session. This is commonly known as a lame duck session. And the primary focus of the final days of the 101st General Assembly was a package of legislation developed and introduced by the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. These proposals were divided among 4 legislative subject areas or pillars consisting of economic equity, education, healthcare and human services, and policing reforms. The policing reform pillar was House Bill 3653, and that was signed into law as Public Act 101-652. During the negotiations on this particular bill, we were successful in advocating for the removal of penalties against the local government distributive fund, as well as the preservation of qualified immunity. Despite the passage of this bill, several more proposals have been introduced this year that will affect municipal governments. We've compiled all of our resources that we have on this topic, including fact sheets and a list of introduced bills and more, and that's all at iml.org/policing reforms. This image here shows you the landing page. Like I said, that's a great resource to check out if you're looking for more information on this particular topic. Another critical issue that we are engaged in is downstate public safety pension amortization. We've been involved in this topic for years, working towards the reform and consolidation of downstate public safety pension funds. As you might be aware, municipalities with a population of 5,000 or more and that have a police and fire department are required to create an Article 3 pension fund for police officers and an Article 4 pension fund for firefighters. There's currently more than 650 of these funds in the state, and they cover more than 41,000 public safety pension participants. In 2019, we were successful in advocating for the consolidation of the investment function of these funds. This will improve investment returns, eliminate unnecessary and redundant administrative costs, and reduce the burden on local taxpayers. However, we feel that work remains to ensure the fund's fiscal viability. Under current law, municipal employers are required to contribute to these funds an amount sufficient to bring the total assets of the fund up to 90% of the total actuarial liabilities by the end of municipal fiscal year 2040. And the fact of the matter is that this is the shortest amortization schedule when you compare it to any statewide, state-administered, or Chicago-based fund. So we're pursuing legislation that would extend that amortization schedule to 2050 or later. We've introduced one proposal, that's House Bill 308, sponsored by Representative West, that would accomplish this goal. We think that this will provide much-needed relief to affected communities and provide a responsible path towards funding these pensions. This is another topic where we have a dedicated landing page for resources. That's iml.org/pensions. So feel welcome to check that out as well. Another issue before the General Assembly includes legislation that would mandate the inventory and replacement of lead service lines. These are underground plumbing lines running from the city's water main to private residents that provide water service. And in some communities, some of these lines are made out of lead. We've been engaged with environmental advocacy groups and others for more than 2 years trying to find a path forward on this topic. We maintain that any plan to mandate the replacement of these lines must include a company revenue and take into consideration the administrative capability, fiscal ability, and requisite staffing of affected communities and any current plans that may be in effect. Since the start of this year, we have met weekly with stakeholders on this topic and hope to have an agreed-upon proposal prior to the end of this legislative session. If you're curious, the current proposals under consideration include Senate Bill 556 and Senate Bill 1168, sponsored by Senator Bush, as well as House Bill 3739, sponsored by Representative Robinson. Another critical issue that may be of interest to your community is the Small Wireless Facility Deployment Act. This act regulates the installation of telecommunications hardware that delivers 5G wireless technology. This hardware is typically deployed in municipal rights-of-way on municipal infrastructure such as utility poles. This act originally took effect on June 1st, 2018, and is set to expire or sunset on June 1st of this year. And due to the impact of the legislation on municipalities throughout the state, we believe that it's critical that any future extensions of this act protect municipal interests. So to that end, IML is advocating for greater authority for municipal officials when it comes to requiring this hardware be located on alternative structures and ensuring that the equipment meets or exceeds all applicable safety regulations. While there's nearly 12 proposals filed on this topic, IML is continuing to meet with industry representatives to try to find a path forward. And then finally, another outstanding issue at the General Assembly is the topic of a state budget. So this would bring us to a 4-letter word you can actually use at the dinner table. It was mentioned earlier, LGDF, which is the abbreviation for the Local Government Distributive Fund. As you may know, during his annual budget address, Governor Pritzker recommended cutting the local share of the Local Government Distributive Fund by an additional 10% when compared to last year's distribution. This is a designated local portion of the income tax revenues distributed to cities and counties on a per capita basis. In your packet today includes our fact sheet on this critical funding source. Now, I need to note that the General Assembly still has to approve this proposal, and we are adamantly opposed to any further reductions to LGDF, and will continue to advocate against legislation that would enact this reduction. This is just a few of the topics that IML is actively involved in. We have many more resources on our legislative page. As I mentioned, that would be iml.org/legislative. And as a municipal official, you can sign up to receive our weekly e-newsletters, our e-newsletter, the State House Briefing, which provides timely updates about what is occurring at the Capitol. Other newsletters you can sign up for is our monthly Federal Focus and our monthly Legal Bulletin. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'd just like to note that if you have a legislative inquiry going forward, you can send that via email at imllegislation@iml.org. Thank you.
Questions on legislation? James.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. I see that I have a book here on home rule versus non-home rule. but the two items that they're talking about extending home rule-like powers to non-home rule municipalities for taxing purposes, what, how much is going to be left of differentiating home rule from non-home rule if they keep extending those capabilities to the non-home rule groups?
Is it okay if I answer this? Okay. So, just a slight correction to the question. They're not actually giving these, they're not actually giving home rule powers to non-home rule communities. We're asking them to. So they really haven't been affording that many. On the motor fuel tax, we requested non-home rule communities to have the ability to adopt a local motor fuel tax by the city council. Statewide, they only gave it to the municipalities in Cook County. So, that's a whole nother issue. That's one example where they did, but we're trying to get it statewide. I guess to the question, there doesn't need to be a distinction. We would prefer that every community is home rule because it allows the local community to make more decisions, the corporate authorities to make more decisions, have more authority. So we actually would like to see more non-home rule communities to have home rule powers. The way they can do that is statutorily to allow non-home rule communities to do something. The big difference between home rule and non-home rule, and you've seen this in whatever was probably advertised for Savoy, their question recently, so I'm sure you probably heard some of that. The difference is that home rule communities can do anything that this General Assembly hasn't said they can't. And non-home rule can only do what the General Assembly has said they can. So there are some things that we think non-home rule communities should be able to do also. So to your question, if there's more that's given to non-home rule, we see that as a good thing. It doesn't take away from home rule.
All right, thank you.
JF.
So thank you again for another very informative presentation. I just had a question of if we as elected officials have a disagreement with the policies that are being put forward as priorities for IML and the legislation, the activism or the lobbying that you all are doing, what does that feedback process look like to be able to say, hey, I don't agree with this direction that you all are advocating for?
Just right there, you can call us, you can tell us, you can stop us, you can email, and that happens. So just yesterday, I responded to a North Shore suburban community in Cook County that asked about 3 bills, saying, why are you opposed to these bills? And I provided the explanation, which for all 3 of them was, it's not what you think it is. So there's more to it. It's got a nice title, but the real issue is a lot deeper. And so we will take a position, and by our board adopted policies and principles, maybe to support or oppose something, as Mitchell went through, that is on a statewide basis. If we oppose something that the city of Urbana thinks is a great idea, you're more than welcome to support it. And that's fine, and it's okay to have the differing opinions. What we're trying to look out for is the statewide perspective. Now, sometimes in these issues that I just answered the question about in this email I got are things that the community said, well, we're all for this. We think this is a great idea, and in fact, we already do this. Why would you be opposed to it? We're not opposed to the idea, and we welcome and encourage you to do that if you wish to. What we're opposed to is the mandate that you have to do it. So if Urbana wants to adopt a policy on something, great, and we are behind you 100% on that. But if the General Assembly tells you you have to, we might be opposed to that. And so if you have a disagreement, just let us know, ask the question. In fact, we have an issue that's out there, and I'll touch on it. It's a gardening bill. And, who doesn't like gardening? I like tomatoes, and that's really about all I like. But there's a piece of legislation that's moving to advance gardening. How could we oppose it? Well, we are opposed to it, and we're very opposed to it. not because of the gardening, but because it eliminates your authority in local zoning, and it eliminates your authority to regulate anything having to do with gardening. So maybe I could build a 3-story greenhouse structure in my front yard. But, you know, that's probably not a good thing. So we have to look deeper into the issue. And if we've opposed it for, there's a reason. But if any community has a difference of opinion, they're welcome to have that. We ask them to tell us so that we do know. Maybe we need to change our opinion.
Any other questions?
Follow-up. Is email the preferred communication on that, or you said call? And for-
Either's fine. I mean, we take, you know, inquiries. However, you can go onto our website, and the page that Mitchell talked about, you can put the bill number in our search box in general, and it'll pull up what he showed you. You can send an email through our inquiry on our website, or through any of our individual email addresses, which are listed on our bios, and, or you can call. If you send us an email, we probably will be able to give you some reference points back. You know, we may be able to give you the bill page, or maybe send you some detail, but however you want to do it is fine.
Thanks.
So I'm the closer here, but we're gonna touch on just wrapping up the legislative piece, and then also concluding the whole morning. Legislative issues are very important, and that's a lot of what we do that is forward-facing. So you'll get a lot of information from us. If you don't want our newsletter, you know, tell us you don't want it. We'll take you off the list. You have to get added onto it, so you're not going to get it automatically. So that form in your packet, if you want to get the stuff, just fill it out, and we'll send it to you. And, you know, it's very informative, but as Mitchell noted, it helps if you talk to your legislators. And even if you don't know an issue, if you're talking to a legislator, you could be like this LGDF. I don't know where LGDF is right now, but we support IML's position. That helps too. And know on that, all we're going to be doing is trying to get you more money. So that's an easy one to support our position. But please be engaged if you can with your local legislators. Now, to the question that was asked, you might have an individual position that's different from your city council's position on something too. So make sure that if you are speaking about something for or against it, you're indicating if it's for or against because of the city or because of yourself, just so you don't get caught on something. And the mayor is usually the spokesperson on those types of issues, so you can talk with her. So to wrap up this morning, you know, this is an exciting moment for you because you're newly elected officials or re-elected officials. Some of the topics we talked about are not really exciting, but they are the law and they're very important. The materials we provided to you are significant. You don't have to go through them all tonight, but if you happen to, and in the middle of the night you've got a question, just give me a call. I'm probably sitting at my desk. So if you have questions about any of these things we've talked about, you can send us an email or call us, and we'll be glad to walk through them with you. This is a real pleasure for us to be able to present to you specific to the city of Urbana, because we usually present these in general, and so we were able to tailor this a little bit more to Urbana. But the issues are going to be faced by municipal officials everywhere across the state. The role of the council as the legislative body is important to keep in mind. So you are policy setters at the top level. You are here to consider issues, to adopt budgets, expend funds, approve and reject policies, and then let the administration carry them out. And the administration in most cases is the mayor and the administrator, who has the authority over the rest of the government. So this table is your workplace. Use it effectively. If you have issues, bring them up, talk about them, debate them, adopt or reject them, and then allow the staff and the administration to go carry them out. That's your role as the legislative body. And if you provide for that, then I think you will have a better relationship with the staff will have a better relationship with you, and you'll have a better relationship with the community, because everybody will understand everybody's role. And you'll each each of those individuals and groups involved will be able to effectively do their jobs. Each community is different, so there are local nuances to everything. So look up, if you have a question like, well, he said this, okay, but it may be a little different here in your local ordinances. So make sure you ask a question if it could have some local impact. Public meetings are for the public. It's important to remember that. Sometimes you'll get people that want to give their full 4 minutes of public comment, and that's okay. You're here to represent them. You are their representative. And this is their meeting, actually. This is the public's meeting. You're just empowered to do their business there. And so sometimes it's easy. I was in elected office locally for nearly 20 years. It's easy to really not appreciate people who come and talk and go on and say the same things over again and maybe say things that aren't factually correct or make accusations. Just take it in as a part of the process and use it to be able to help them maybe later, know what their concerns are and serve them to the best of your ability. We have a survey. It's that green sheet I mentioned at the beginning of the program today. I would love for you to fill that out. I'll take it. Our staff is going to collect the materials that they brought, and they're going to take off. I'm going to join you for lunch and stay. I'll be glad to answer any additional questions you have as a part of that. And just in closing, I want to thank you again for the opportunity, and I want to congratulate each of you for the role that you will soon be undertaking, and look forward to working with you. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Brad. I just want to thank once again Brad, Cassie, Patrick, Allie, and Mitchell for being here on a Saturday morning. We really appreciate it. It's the first time I've experienced training like this, and I think it's been, and I've learned a lot this morning. So thank you for the resources. One thing I didn't highlight was the IML's role in providing information over the past year related to the pandemic. We were deluged with information on a daily basis, all day long, as I'm sure some of you were in your jobs, and IML provided very good summaries, updates, and really helped hone in on some of the most important pieces of information that we needed to know, particularly keeping up with the governor's emergency orders, which came fast and furious the first few months. So we were always a half step behind, but that's where we had to be. So it was extremely helpful, and I appreciate that as much. And I'll reiterate, they are open to your calls, your questions, and are very, very responsive, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
So we have, please fill out your surveys. We have your boxed lunches in the back of the room, and we will reconvene promptly at 1 o'clock so we can stay on schedule.